On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, the Thunder cap off a 5-0 week with Chet Holmgren's return. Who are the winners and the losers of the NBA trade deadline, and what lies ahead for Oklahoma City right before the All-Star break?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. On today's show, brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. We're joined by Michael Martin. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube at Michael on Sports to discuss the Thunder's 5-game winning streak, what lies ahead this week right before the All-Star break, and the winners and losers from the deadline. Michael, 5-game winning streak, perfect homestand, and an impressive win against Memphis. What was your biggest game of this week?
Ironically, it was the Raptors game, which was never in doubt, but it's just Chet's return, I would guess, I think for myself and a lot of Thunder fans, I would say is the biggest game.
Yeah, I mean, like, whenever we were previewing this week, first of all, we thought it was going to be an incredible homestand. It was not, because, like, Milwaukee doesn't play their guys, and Phoenix is Phoenix. But, like, we weren't even considering the Raptors game as anything worthwhile. And then Thursday morning, they announced that Chet is going to play, which is earlier than any of us thought he would be back on the court after suffering that hip fracture. And in a week that was lackluster anyway because of who was all on the court, that became must-watch TV. That got everybody back in the building. I mean, the energy for that Raptors game was the best energy that there's been this whole homestand. Whenever coming into it, we thought you were going to see some pretty competitive basketball, but you did not. You saw a 5-0 week for the Thunder. Let's stick with Chet Holmgren. Only played one game because yesterday was the second night of a back-to-back on Saturday, so he was resting. But on that one game, on that very small sample size, all those caveats thrown out there, what did you see from Chet Holmgren?
I saw a guy who looked fearless in terms of just rim protecting after that injury. I mean, we saw him in a similar play that he sort of got injured in against the Golden State Warriors. He goes up, gets two-hand block on Scotty Barnes. I thought he looked good given the circumstance. I mean, a lot of it was just, I think they're throwing him out there in these games just to shake off some rust. I get the idea from some people of like, are they rushing him back early? I promise the Thunder are not rushing him back. If he was not ready to play, they would not be playing him. This is not anything like that. And then you saw the offensive versatility that he provides. I mean, he only scores 4 points, but like just his off the dribble game, just the threat he is as a shooter around the league and how teams have to respect him. And then just overall his competitive fire and stuff that he brings to this team, it looked like it gave this OKC squad a little bit more life.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly were able to rally around him, and for good reason, obviously. I mean, it was a cool story. But you're right. The biggest thing that stood out to me was like, yeah, the offense will take some time to come around. We can talk about that. But defensively, he was really close to like where he should be defensively, where we're used to seeing him defensively. And in your first ever game back to be that close to your one-to-one self was really impressive. And like you said, challenging guys at the rim, being fearless to contest every single shot that comes in the paint, being so intimidating that guys aren't even attempting shots in the paint because you're down there. Having all that in game one against a team who you're not afraid of. Like if you didn't contest every single shot against the Raptors, oh well. But to do it, I thought just showed that you don't have to worry about one, his body being limited, and two, his mindset being limited. This is going to be the same guy who goes and competes every possession, who goes and tries to block every single shot, and makes anchoring this Thunder defense a lot better, and the Thunder defense is already historic. So like if they get better, who knows what the ceiling can be for Chet. But offensively, we did get to see him and Isaiah Hartenstein play a lot together. It was a different look, but I thought it was a positive one.
Yeah, I like the dynamic of those two guys. I mean, you think with a double big lineup there could be some shooting concerns, but Chet, obvious shooter, and then Hartenstein, you have to defend him up top and give him a little bit more pressure because he is such a dynamic passer, and the Thunder use him in a lot of dribble handoffs, so you can't just give that cushion. But I thought it was interesting, and I like that they sort of put a lot of eggs in the basket of like, this is a game where we're going to try to get Chet shaken off the rust, like I mentioned, but let's also get these guys a lot of burn together and sort of just, I don't want to say microwave the chemistry, but sort of fast track it in a way that wouldn't happen if you just staggered them.
Yeah, I think that once they're fully healthy and once they have that chemistry, they will do more of the stuff that we've talked about since the summertime. Whenever we go back and forth on how they're going to use Hartenstein, and they're going to start staggering them, and they're going to start blanketing the game in 48 minutes of rim protection and all that good stuff. But right now, when you're trying to play catch up, you do want to use them together as much as possible. I thought that they were able to play off of one another really well. I mean, they ran a pick and roll together. They had a couple off-ball screens, pin downs from Hartenstein for Holmgren, which got Holmgren 2 good looks. He made one of them. And I just thought that overall, if that's like your baseline, then it just shows the potential for how good that duo, how good that this team can be. And it takes us into Saturday night, Michael, where the Thunder, no Lou Dort, no Kaysen, no Chet, and the Grizzlies fully healthy, and the Thunder control that game. The Thunder beat Memphis on the road, and they win 5 in a row. Like that should have been a scheduled loss, and that was one of their more impressive wins. Does that just kind of solidify that we can stop overthinking this? The Thunder are pretty clearly the favorites in the West.
I think we can stop overthinking it. I think in the regular season they're the clear favorites, as you've seen with their record, but I still think that there are some like potential matchups that could give them a little bit of a scare. But right now they're definitely the favorites to come out of the West. It was really impressive to go against a full strength Memphis team, and then just like you mentioned, all the guys. Alex Caruso gets his first start, and they just completely shut out Ja Morant, cut off the head of the snake for that team, and just sort of just made them not even look like competition. They're the 2 seed in the West right now, and I thought it was really impressive by Shea and sort of how he played, where obviously he had 5 fouls towards end of the third, start of the fourth, so that was sort of problematic, but he has a game against the Raptors where it seems like he was sort of like just sitting back, sort of coasting, letting things come to him, and you could tell he was like saving some ammo for this game, and the Thunder needed it. And then J-Dub continues to impress me. I mean, we've been hard on him this year just in terms of the drives and the physicality and stuff like that. He's really, really taken a leap sort of in that circumstance and that aspect of his game, so I was really impressed.
Yeah, I thought that it was a really impressive game by all those facets, and Aaron Wiggins was awesome. The way that he was able to score at all 3 levels. And I thought that Wiggins kind of, you saw what can be whenever he plays a more comfortable position, because he's mentioned to me multiple times now that he's uncomfortable having to size up, having to play, having to defend multiple positions, which is hard because that's the whole system is based on that. But he got to start last night and played mostly in that 2-3 position instead of playing the 4. And he was a lot better defensively. Still, of course, the weakest link defensively, kind of comparatively to how great everyone else is, to no real fault of his own. But allowed him to be much more comfortable and free offensively, where he was able to get buckets. And so that starting lineup really helped them and propelled them past Memphis. And defensively, nobody on Memphis had even a great game or a good game. Like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane, they had passable games by their standards. It wasn't like a really good Desmond Bane or a really good Jaren Jackson game. And then Ja Morant was just terrible, frankly, in the game. He was disoriented. He couldn't hit shots. It was really impressive to see them without 3 of their 4 best defenders do that to Memphis.
Yeah, I think that this is something that, like, obviously John Morant's not going to play that bad, but I think he's going to struggle in a potential series against this Thunder team. I think that they just have all the stuff to really make his life tough. He's not a great shooter, and the Thunder are just going to double the ball with his hands, be really physical with him. He's a sort of a slight guy. Cason Wallace, Lou Dort, J-Dub, Caruso, whoever they put on him are really going to outmuscle him. And then for the rest of the Grizzlies, like, Jaren Jackson's a really unique player, but if you can go sort of double big like the Thunder can now, even though they weren't able to in that one, and have Chet or Hartenstein on the weak side, Jaren Jackson Jr. is not a super dynamic post-up player, and if you can stay with him on the perimeter for these threes, like they have guys with some length like Shea, J-Dub, Wiggins, others to sort of contest his shot, I think it neutralizes him in a real way. And then Bane, yeah, he's sort of a hot, cold guy, streaky shooter. Well, he's one of the elite shooters, but he can really pop off, or it's just an average game for him. So I liked what the Thunder did all around. Obviously, you're going to have a Grizzlies team that plays better if they potentially match up again, but overall, I think this was one of those open and shut cases for the Thunder, especially because just nobody's guarding Shea on that entire team.
Yeah, and then that was the interesting part to me was that like whenever you list out this roster on paper, I was thinking that they're not better than the Thunder by any stretch, but they do some things that make you believe that they could have a matchup advantage against the Thunder, where like they match up with the Thunder better than their talent suggests that they should. A little bit similar last year to the Lakers. Like the Lakers last year were a bad basketball team. They were a first round exit. They weren't good, but against the Thunder, they played way above their skis because they were so long, because they were so physical, and what they were able to do to Shea in the mid-range, what they were able to fly out and contest threes while also imposing their will inside. And I was like, I wonder if Memphis can do some of that. And then you see them play the C version of the Thunder, like where again, these top guys are out, including AJ, and the Thunder just waxed them. I mean, they got a little dicey at the start of the fourth quarter, but I don't know about you. I never really considered that a run of like, oh, they're back in the game, they're going to win this game. I considered that okay, this is like a string of unlucky plays, like the 4-point play, 3. It's like, okay, that sucks. It's kind of a run, but like they're not really back in it.
Yeah, it felt like just sort of a late game surge to sort of threaten it, but it wasn't a really big deal. It was one of those things where it's like, guys, let's not let this get out of hand, but it didn't seem like a real threat. And yeah, I mean, you see the matchup where you think of a guy like Zach Edey, where he might be able to punish the Thunder on the board, but they just totally neutralized him in terms of like getting out on the fast break and in transition, where he's just not going to be able to keep up. It's one of those things where the Thunder or the Grizzlies are going to have to make a decision of, is it worth it? And ultimately it wasn't, and that plays right into the Thunder's hands. And then you just saw turnover after turnover generated where you have a guy like John Morant who's an elite ball handler, but if you double the ball out of his hands, Jaren Jackson Jr. is not a consistent ball handler. He's going to turn it over a lot. Desmond Bane is at best a second ball handler and not a guy who I'd be really threatened by. Jalen Wells, really nice rookie, not another guy who I'd really fear. So this feels sort of like I think Minnesota's the number one team in terms of like the Thunder would just force a billion turnovers on them, but I can see that same issue arising for Memphis.
Yeah, and I thought if you're Memphis, you're really scared right now after that game of Edey was played off the floor. Jalen Wells was hunted every single time down the floor. Like you're two promising, impactful rookies, especially Wells, because like you take Wells out of this rotation and all that he provides them on both ends in other matchups, then their rotation really is dicey for a team that we talk about their depth a lot. But Wells got play off the floor. Edey got play off the floor. If that happens consistently, which we don't know if it will or won't, but if that happens consistently, it could be getting late early on Beale Street against this matchup. But coming up, let's talk NBA trade deadline. Who won? Who lost the deadline? Who got better in their pursuit of the Thunder? But first, I want to say right now, but our good friends over at Skims. When I found out that Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give them a try. And let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I'm actually wearing Skims right now. The fit, the comfort, the style, it's great. Skims has changed the game with their men's line. There's something for everyone from boxer briefs to classic briefs. It's all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. And so you can go check out Skims today at their men line at skims.com or go to the Skims stores. Let me tell you that we're sending you there. So tell them that we sent you by selecting podcast in the survey menu and selecting the show from the drop-down box below. And then this will serve as the perfect gift for Valentine's Day for yourself or for your loved ones. Skims has launched the perfect Valentine's gift shop ever. It's available for sizes from women, men, kids, and even pets. Even pets have skimwear. Maybe I should get my dog some Skims. Anyway, you can check it out today at skims.com. We're back on Locked On Thunder on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Michael Martin at Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube, at Michael on Sports on social media, joining us today to talk trade deadline. And Michael, we have 3 winners, 3 losers from this deadline. Our list could overlap, but I'll give you the first draft pick of winners and losers. Let's start with the winners. Who's the first winner?
It's got to be the Lakers, obviously. I mean,
Yep.
you get Luka for Steele in one of the most, or the most I don't want to say the most lopsided, but the most shocking trade in basically sports history. And regardless if they get knocked out in the first round, they make a deep playoff run. This is success for the Lakers in the long term, and they're especially a winner for getting Luka at that price, given what other teams probably would have offered for him if he was on the open market. This is not rubbing salt in the wound for you at all as a former Mavs fan, but yeah, the Luka deal, it's just in reality at the time, and then just historically, it's going to become even more bewildering unless something just crazy comes out. But obviously, the Lakers have to be the 1-1 pick.
Yeah, the Lakers for sure, the biggest winners of the deadline. They get gifted a generational star for a team that, like, once LeBron would have retired, they would have had no true direction, no true ability to net that. And even though the Mark Williams trade fell through, it's still incredible deadline. They just are lacking a big. But the thing about Luka is, Luka brought Dwight Powell to the Western Conference Finals. Like, yes, they're lacking a big. Let's see what Luka can do with Jackson Hayes. Let's see what Luka can do with their current front court rotation. And again, and like you said, even if it's not enough, even if it's the first round exit, it's still a humongous win for LA. Now, tell me if this is crazy. Tell me if this is crazy. I'm going to say that the Golden State Warriors are winners in this deadline because it's not as though I think that like Jimmy Butler and Steph are going to go on a quest to win a championship, but your coach outwardly said to the public, yeah, we got to go make a move. Like we have to go do something. And so if like that's what you're willing to say on the record, you can only imagine what's being talked about, what the feelings are behind the scenes. And you turned guys who are you're not going to really miss come playoff time into Jimmy Butler. Yes, it's not a perfect fit. Yes, it's not a perfect guy to have on in your locker room. But for you, like for the circumstances, it's the best you could have done after Kevin Durant said he didn't want to be there. And so they gave him that gaudy contract extension. But you know what? That's your timeline anyway. You only have like a 2 more year window of this. So who really cares about that contract extension that he could even opt out of? So I thought that they did the best they could have done, which still's probably not good enough, but at least they maximized what they could have done.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy. I wasn't super impressed with the deal. I mean, like you mentioned, it was the best that they were going to get for the assets that they were willing to give up. And I think ultimately the legacy of this trade is going to be just how that contract ages for Jimmy, which I'm not expecting well. And just the ultimately the two timeline stuff with the Warriors has really derailed the second half of Steph's prime. So not feeling super terrible for the Warriors. I think Jimmy Butler's a really good player, especially in the playoffs, and they're more threatening. But ultimately, I don't think it changes their destiny beyond being like at best like a second round exit.
So I'll snake it, and then we'll go to yours to end the winner section. My last winner, and then we'll get your 3 winners, will be Washington. I think that Washington won the deadline. It's not flashy. It's not cool, but they've collected now like 4 2024 first-round prospects, and all the prospects are really interesting, and you have the runway to grow with them and to see if they're anything. And as we know in Oklahoma City, like look how many picks at the Thunder went and gotten all these drafts, and how many of them were not good players and ended up not being good players. But it leads you down the road of some of them will pop off. Like what if they never gave Wiggins a chance as the 55th overall pick, and now he did pop off. So them kind of modeling that Oklahoma City front office, because they have a lot of former Oklahoma City guys, I thought was very evident at the trade deadline, and I think it's sending them in the right direction, getting closer to Cooper Flagg, and they got Kyle Kuzma out of their locker room, which was always a good thing. So that was my last winner. Let me get your winners from the trade deadline.
I also really like the Wizards, and they were heavily considered for me. I liked exactly what you mentioned, getting Kuzma out of there and sort of the pool foundation of leadership. And you get guys like Marcus Smart and Chris Middleton who don't risk your tank for Cooper Flagg, but at the same time, I think could be like sort of a discount version of what, this is a Thunder emulation sort of front office of what happened with Al Horford on this team, of being a vet who's won and been a really good player in this league, who can sort of laid a foundation, and they don't risk anything in the long term. But my other winners, I really liked what the Cavs did. I don't think it ultimately is a giant risk, but I respect the fact that they didn't just stand pat. They saw an issue with their team despite their record of going against teams like the Cavs and the Thunder, or going against teams like the Celtics and the Thunder and other teams like even New York, where big wings give them a lot of trouble. And they didn't just say, hey, we have a good record, we're just going to stand pat. We're going to move Karis LeVert and just not really any big picks or anything interesting, but they take a flyer on DeAndre Hunter, who has been up and down, but having a really good offensive season this year. He's not an elite defender, but he has a lot more physical tools than Karis LeVert. And overall, whether it works or not, I commend the Cavs for taking that risk. And then my final winner, I would say, is the Spurs. I mean, I was a little bit negative on the idea, or low on the idea of trading for Fox, but if I knew that was the deal to get it done, then I would have done it. They don't give up hardly any of their good draft capital, and they don't give up any young players of value, and they get to sort of get this little extra run of Fox and Wemby. So I'd say overall, those are my two other winners. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I like that list a lot. I think that the Cavs do deserve credit because they have a great record, but Karis LeVert, like being the biggest piece gone, like that's not going to hurt you come playoff time. And even if DeAndre's not their answers to everything, and he's not, and even if he does, still struggle, like for example, Celtics fans right now are putting out these highlight clips of like Jason Tatum scoring over DeAndre Hunter. Guess who Jason Tatum also would have scored over? Karis LeVert. Guess who he scores over easier? Karis LeVert. And so it's like, yes, Tatum and Shea and these guys are still going to score. It's about how difficult can you make it, and I think that they got better in making it difficult for these guys. Not stopping them, not holding them to 0 points or whatever, but it's more difficult to have on the perimeter tour. Now you got him and Wade out there funneling them into your bigs. I like that move a lot from Cleveland. And then San Antonio, you're right. I mean, the package that you got for Fox, like they had to give for Fox, was mind-blowing of like, okay, yeah, you do this every single time, every single day of the week. And the fact that you have a star who wants to be there is really good. And you don't have the pressure of like, this is just fun now the rest of the year. It's kind of like the Thunder whenever they went to the play-in tournament of like, it was just fun down the stretch. We didn't know for sure that they were going to make it, and they kind of made it because Dallas bowed out. But like, it was just fun to see how they chased it, because you knew it's not really about this season. It's about like the season after this, and the one after this, and the one after this. And so like that's the same feeling I have with the Spurs. But coming up, got to talk losers after talking winners at the NBA trade deadline and the week ahead for the Thunder. But first, I want to say right now, but our good friends over at FanDuel, go check out FanDuel today, because when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on the action at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on fourth quarter comebacks, you can stay in the action with FanDuel. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine live bets into a same game parlay. So check out FanDuel right now. Love using FanDuel. It's great. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So just visit FanDuel.com, join today. That's FanDuel.com, and for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more at FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And you can go see those lines, including the line that's already projected for February 25th, whenever the Dallas Mavericks go to LA and play the Lakers. The Mavericks 4-point underdogs in that game. So if you have some strong opinion on this game a month from now almost, you can go check it out at FanDuel. We're back. I'm Locked On Thunder. I'm Rylan Stiles, host of the Locked On Thunder podcast. Find me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles, joined by Michael Martin. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube at Michael on Sports. Michael, we talked our winners. Let's talk our losers. Who's your first loser of the trade deadline?
I don't know if they're the biggest loser, but one that came to mind was the Phoenix Suns. Late in January, they make that trade with Utah where they give up a completely unprotected 2031 first-round pick for, quite frankly, 3 really bad firsts from Utah. And you thought that was to set up a potential Jimmy Butler trade, and ultimately they don't even do anything. So I just think that it's an abject failure for the Suns, as they just seem completely directionless, and everybody seems irritated in their locker room now that Kevin Durant was almost traded behind the scenes. They get rid of Yusuf Nurkic, so I guess that helps, but overall it just feels like the Suns are just destined for just sort of some implosion in the next year. Yeah,
so we had the exact same list so far. I have the Suns number 1 for me, like far and away the worst, because like you're already hearing the reports. half a year early that Katie didn't really like being shopped around. Like he didn't really like the fact that his name was out there. So he's probably going to leave in the summertime now, as a matter of fact. So it just seems like a complete mess with the Suns. So we each have the Suns. So we already have one. I'll go to my number two, and my number two is just the Chicago Bulls. I mean, it's another deadline that comes and goes where I have no idea what the direction, what the hope, what the messaging, what the identity of this organization is. And it's getting to the point where even Billy Donovan is out there. Your head coach is out there telling people, yeah, I don't know the direction that we have in our front office right now. It's pretty funny that's kind of why he left Oklahoma City. And now look where he's stuck. But nonetheless, it's true. They don't have any direction. They don't know what they're doing. I wish that they would just bottom out, but they're not doing that. They're also not trying to go win. I don't get it. So I'm going to call them a loser.
They're absolutely a loser. They have been just head scratching for a while of their decision making. And I'll go with a team that I feel like is in a similar boat, making sort of similar decisions. That's the Toronto Raptors, of just like, where are you going? Brandon Ingram, I mean, I guess you trade for a guy like that. They're buying low on him, but you also have to extend him, which is why no one was really trading for him. And to me, it just seems like they have a variety of guys. Like Scotty Barnes maybe can be a number two guy on a really good team, but it feels to me like they have just, what if we had three guys who were the third best player on a team with RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, and Scotty Barnes? And I just feel like this team sort of emulating the Bulls of just like, we're happy to be in the play-in. We think that's great. We'd rather not rebuild or retool or try to really go after a big fish and try to reset this thing. Instead, we're just happy being competitive and just sort of coasting. So I'd say the Raptors and the Bulls are in the same boat.
Yeah, the Raptors are very confusing as well. And I'm torn between two teams for my third spot because we both had the Suns. I'm going to go Sacramento. Sacramento, like, why? Like, why did you go get Zach? Why did you go get Zach LaVine? Like, why do you care this much about making the play-in tournament? Like, you could have maximized your return on Fox, who is your last chance. Like, if you want to pull off the whole Oklahoma City thing, Fox and Sabonis are your two chances to get something of value, the same way the Thunder did for Paul George. Obviously, these two guys are not Paul George. They're not the third in MVP voting Paul George, but they're your only hope of getting something even close to a jump start, like a little starter pack, if you will. And they botched it. I mean, they completely botched it. We've already seen LaVine and DeRozan play together. We've already seen what this can look like, and it's not very good. And now your best lineup includes three just pretty porous defenders. I don't get it. I don't get why they're so hell-bent on making the play-in, and I don't think that they're going to make it anyway.
I feel like it's a little bit of them just being bad for so long that they're just sort of just grasping for straws of just like, let's just stay somewhat relevant. We can't go back to being the Kangs in a way. And LaVine, I think, has really improved his trade value. I didn't mind him going to the Kings. I think it's a bigger thing where it's like you're just trapped with like the DeRozan deal, I think is one of the worst contracts in basketball. Sabonis, you could obviously flip for something else, but I don't know that his market is just tremendous either. I like guys like Malik Monk, but yeah, they probably could have flipped and just really reset this thing like you mentioned, but I don't think ultimately a lot of their roster in terms of guys they would actually give up, because I think you could get something nice for Keegan Murray, but the rest of the guys, it's not really going to turn into anything. So you could rip it down to the studs, but I think they've already missed out on some first pick swaps and things like that, so there's no real reason. So once again, the Kings are sort of just back in limbo and sort of are Bulls, Raptors, West in a way.
They are just trapped. Now, I'm interested to see if you have the team that I was torn on your list.
I have the Brooklyn Nets because they just should have done something. I mean, we've seen this over and over with teams like just not trading at the peak of their value with role players like Cam Johnson, and it feels like a major missed opportunity. He's not going to be a guy, even if you get a Cooper flag, who can play with him once Cooper hits his prime in the next like 6 to 7 years. So we've seen this over and over where like the Bulls did this for existence, where we're just dunking on the Bulls with Alex Caruso, where probably could have gotten 2 firsts for him a year ago, and then you wait, and then you trade him for Josh Giddey, which is not the valuation of 2 firsts. And Cam Johnson, it just seems like something, once again, that the Nets are in for, and I don't really know. It seems like they're doing a good job in their tank, but just keeping guys like Claxton and Cam Johnson, I don't really see the point in.
Yeah, I don't see the point in that either. I think that that's a big win for the Thunder, though, because it gives them the option to this summer go revisit Cam Johnson, who we both think is like a perfect fit for this organization. If something, pops up in the postseason to make you believe that they should still do it, which there very well might be. So I can agree with that. It felt like this was going to be the summer where they could. I mean, the trade deadline where they could have gotten maximum value. I do wonder if there was that 2-week stretch where we stopped hearing about them because now this star wants out. Now this star's available. And I wonder if they got a little bit blindsided by that. Whereas if Jimmy never wanted out and if Fox never wanted out, and that's kind of all that's out there to improve any of these rosters, maybe they would have then gotten the package that we thought they could have gotten. But they still should have been able to get something for Cam with how wide open that really both these conferences have convinced themselves that they are. Do you have another loser? I lost track. I can't count to 3 and Lon.
I think I had 3. I can go another one if you want.
Yeah. So my honorable mention was the Milwaukee Bucks. It just felt like making moves for the sake of making a move. I don't like Kyle Kuzma. I don't like him, especially for giving up Middleton. I don't like the pairing at all, and I just don't understand why you were so transaction heavy or had that transaction fever. I think that's what some of these teams got wrapped up in. It's like you saw the Luka thing, and that's okay, we got to go do something. We got to go do, even if it's a bad something, we got to go do something. And I thought it was a bad something for Milwaukee.
Yeah, I felt the same way a little bit about Golden State, where it felt like Steph almost went in there. It's like, we need to do something. If they can pull this Luka trade off, we can pull off something. But the Bucks in particular, I think you hit it right on the nail on the head of just making a move to make a move. And this to me feels like a front office move that just was sort of just made to make Giannis happy and Dame happy of look, guys, we're trying to do something. But overall, I don't think it changes their destiny. I think Chris Middleton, when he's playing, is a better player, but coming off double ankle surgery, I get why you sort of want to move off that deal and just go, even if Kyle Kuzma is bad, we just won't play him. But if he's good, then maybe that can turn into something. And then the team that we left off of the losers that I think is just very obvious, which is why I just put duh in the description of my notes, is the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, the Dallas Mavericks, I wish we had a stronger word than losers that we could use on this show for what the Dallas Mavericks are. I mean, they use a special chair in the hotel for what they just did with the Lakers. But, Michael, we do have a very abbreviated week this week because of the trade deadline. Only 3 games for the Thunder. You have New Orleans on Monday in the Paycom Center, Miami on Wednesday in the Paycom Center, then a back-to-back against Minnesota on Thursday, and then you're at the All-Star break where the Thunder will not be as well represented as they once thought because Cason Wallace has been replaced in the Rising Stars game by Brendan Podziemski because of a shoulder injury. So feels like the NBA just told us something that the Thunder haven't quite said yet, but he's not going to play in the Rising Stars game. You imagine that means he won't play at all this week, so we can keep that in mind. A back-to-back, which Chet did not play in the first back-to-back he was available for. So you can imagine he won't play in one of those Heat or Minnesota games. I do wonder which game it would be that he doesn't play in because you would kind of like to see him return home and get to play in Minnesota. But there's also that business element of hey, we have tickets to sell at home where we could see Chet playing. But New Orleans, Miami, Minnesota, not the most daunting slate, but also you got to factor in some possible cruisitude into the All-Star break. Where are you at on this week?
3-0 at worst, 2-1. I liked what you mentioned about Chet. I think there's also a dynamic of just why the Thunder picked the Raptors game in particular for him to come back in. Of just, you didn't know that Jakob Poeltl wasn't going to play for that long, but that lack of threat of inside presence. And I think you could see the same thing against the Heat rather than going against the Wolves and having him thrown out there against Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid, just some more bigger, physical, burly guys. I mean, Bam is there for the Heat, but Hartenstein can guard him most of the time, and then Khalil Ware I'm not really too afraid of for Chet's physicality. But those other games, like New Orleans, just win, show up, win, you'll be fine. The Heat, I think, is a win, and then the Wolves, I think that's the biggest potential for a loss, second night of a back-to-back. But as we've seen, and as I mentioned earlier, just the turnovers you can force against that team that really, really lacks any lead ball handling, I think is a big thing.
Yeah, so I agree. I think that you look at this team, they're 42-9. They've clearly earned the trust of they don't lose consecutive games and they don't take nights off and all that good stuff. to where they're just so superior than New Orleans. It's not even worth discussing. Miami, I think that they're so much better than it's still not worth discussing, and they're so great at home. And we just saw that like a really beat up crew against the Grizzlies, who are a much better team than Miami. The Thunder got a win with a lesser crew, basically a split squad as spring training is starting this week. And then Minnesota, they're playing a lot better right now. Like you mentioned, it's a back-to-back, and the Minnesota has these like personnel things that could make life difficult on the Thunder. The Thunder also have personnel things that make life just not worth living in Minnesota at times because they're turning the ball over so much, and it makes you just want to kind of take your ball and go home with how many turnovers that Minnesota will have against Oklahoma City. So I think that they should have a 3-0 week. I think it's acceptable if they have a 2-1 week. I think anything below that will have a really different conversation than we've ever had this season yet on our next show together, Michael. But let them know what you got cooking up on Let's Talk Thunder, and of course at Michael on Sports on social media.
So recently just had a Chet return video about sort of what he brings, what to expect. But last week I plugged a J-Dub Do It All-Star video, which sort of got derailed by the trade deadline and all that craziness, and then Chet returning. But that'll be back before All-Star Weekend in the next week, where it'll just be about J-Dub, his all-around game, just sort of some historical comps, and where he's really, really made some leaps and bounds this season.
The Do It All-Star, cannot wait for that. And then we'll have the All-Star Weekend to recap with any good quotes from Mark and J-Dub and Shea, and any good moments from that game. It'll be a lot of fun. But Michael, thanks again for another fun week unlocked on Thunder. Until tomorrow, we're going to recap the game against New Orleans. Be good and be good to one another.